Good morning, everyone. I'm Tabitha Hassell with Tabs on Tap. Hopefully, you guys are off to having a fantastic Wednesday morning. I had to think for a second, what day is it? But good morning to you all. I had to put that little screen up in the beginning, escape from New York coming soon, because it's true. It is so true. I'm hearing that there are upwards of 1 million people who are now looking to leave New York City. So, no big surprise there, but we're going to talk a lot about that today. And everyone wants to talk about the Democrat win, but is it really a Democrat win? Did you expect any of these areas to turn red? Did you expect Virginia to have a Republican, as governor, or a Republican, as a lieutenant governor or the attorney general? No. Virginia is actually one of our most our most liberal states. New York City, did you expect really to have a conservative or a Republican win, being mayor in New York? No. Did you expect Cuomo? Maybe, and I think Cuomo, I'm not going to say he didn't have the votes. I think he probably would have had the votes, but there was a lot of irregularities in the election yesterday. I'm not using the word cheating. I don't know that we have evidence of cheating, but there was an awful lot of things going on in New York City yesterday, as well as a lot of other areas as well, that really makes you think, okay, they're pulling out all the stops, Prop 50, of course, passing in California. Good morning, Jay. Good morning, Rob. Good morning, Linda. I might have to cut the show short today. Yesterday during the show, my doctor called and I didn't even see it or know. So I'm going to try to keep an eye out today because I missed his call. And he's like, "Oh, I'll call you back tomorrow." And we know how that works. We've got to be ready when they call because obviously they don't have a lot of time. And I still don't have the results yet from my biopsy. They did like a bronchial wash. I think I've told you guys they call lavage. I do have the results from that. Really didn't show anything. I didn't really expect it to. And I don't even know if I expect the biopsy to show anything either. The last time I had this biopsy done, it showed necrosis and that was it. There was nothing else there. So I don't expect to see anything this time either. I doubt anything has changed, but the reason why I got the biopsy is because it's becoming more what they call avid on a PET scan. It's getting more of a hot spot, a brighter hot spot than what it once was. And also because the lymph nodes in the area are kind of like conglomerated together, which is never a good sign, but that can mean a whole lot of different things. So it is very important for me to talk to my doctor today. So hopefully he calls me back. And I hate it that I missed his call, but when I'm talking, I don't even usually see my phone. Good morning, Mary. Send the mayor of New York some bacon and Christmas cards. Mary, I've been looking a lot into this. I really have. And I'm going to play some videos where, how can I not? This is something that's very important because we always talk about on this show, or I've talked about quite a bit, that you can kind of keep an eye on what's going over on, what they call across the pond over in the UK, what's taking place in, parts of Europe. And that is they elected their first Muslim mayor 10 years ago. 10 years ago. And look how much things have changed in those 10 years. And can we expect to see the same here in the United States? I think that's a good possibility. I think that we're living in a time of extremes. We go from one extreme to the other. And now, this has been a long time coming. This is not something that snuck up on us out of nowhere. Because if you guys recall, when Obama was president, he brought the Muslim Brotherhood into the White House. Remember, he gave a lot of those people jobs. Now, I will tell you that Zohran Mamdani is the opposite of the Muslim Brotherhood. He is the opposite. There's two different groups, of course, of Muslims, probably more that I'm not aware of, but two different groups, of course. So that's the Shiite and the Sunni. Now, he is Shiite. He's a Shia. So that's very different than being a Sunni. If he was a Sunni, I would be far more worried than what I am now. That would be a big difference because the FBI has done several studies of terrorism, in around the world, and 99% of all terror groups are Sunni. The FBI doesn't even track Shiite terror groups because there just simply are none. And so that can at least give us a little bit of solace that he's not likely, excuse me, if I can talk today, to bring terrorism in or support terrorism or that type of radicalization. Now, that doesn't mean that he doesn't want to have Islam in every household. It doesn't mean that he doesn't want socialism. I've done a lot of research on Mamdani. His wife does not wear a hijab. She does not wear a burqa. I've not seen that anywhere. But a lot of the people, of course, that they support do. And as a matter of fact, I'm going to play a video here of his intern. And Jay says it's proof they don't teach history and voters are uneducated. Plus, a disgraced Cuomo wouldn't have won regardless. You're probably right, Jay, but he got 41.6% of the vote. Good morning, Karen. And had there not been so many irregularities at the polls, maybe he would have gotten a little bit more. Allegedly, and I don't know who's doing the counting, there are, a million or more New Yorkers who say they're going to be leaving the state of New York if Mamdani won. So, of course, that's a combination of conservatives and maybe some Democrats who just didn't want Mamdani to win. So it's probably a combination of both of those things. But I'm going to play a video for you here of Mamdani's intern. And I have her name. I don't remember what it is. And it quite honestly doesn't even matter. But you can take a look at her video here.
And the true believer knows that none of this is in vain, that this is all jihad, that this is all ibadah, and that this is all counted for by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so the conversation of doxing, the conversation of getting arrested and suspended, I think it's time for Muslims to start to say, all right, so what? Do what you want. I'm gonna do what I gotta do, because it's about time to do that. And I know everybody has their own families and has an education and everything. It's just a question. We don't want to get doxxed and we don't want to get suspended and we don't want to get arrested. How gangsta are you? That's just my question. How much are you willing to do it? And I know everyone has their own risk levels, but at the end of the day, that's a question to ask ourselves. How committed am I to this? To what extent of my personal material gains am I willing to sacrifice for this bigger noble cause? And subhanAllah, I truly believe that when your heart is in the right place, if you get suspended, if you get doxxed, because it's bound to happen when you're doing a righteous cause and when you're doing something for the sake of Allah here in the West, it will never ever be in vain. And the true believer does not fear that, because the true believer knows that the akhirah is a promise.
Okay, so she talks about being a jihadist, and that doesn't necessarily mean, violence, but it means put your jihad on, go out and do what you have to do to make sure Islam spreads. And again, we're going to play a video later where another follower of Mamdani says we need Islam in every single household. And absolutely, Mamdani does believe that. But like I said yesterday, Mamdani, he's a product, he's a brand, he's not a person like we are. He is just as selected as Obama was. You can tell, you can watch him, you can see how he interacts with people, you can see what he does. There's absolutely a selected person. This guy was absolutely groomed. Remember how Obama just kind of came out of nowhere? And then the next thing he's parading around everywhere. He's leading all these groups. He's doing all this radical stuff. And trust me, Obama is very radical. He absolutely is. And he's another one that I don't think your average Democrat voter really knew what they were getting into, because what Obama was on the surface was all make believe. None of that was real. None of it is real. He's probably a little bit more real now since the spotlight's not on him nonstop. But none of what you saw with Obama was real. It's just a facade. And he was trained very well to put on that facade and to speak eloquently. He didn't make any of his social media posts. Those were not him. Those were staff members. He didn't write any of his own speeches. Those were all staff members. He was a really good face for the country, for Democrats. He put forth that what I call like Wendy's. If you go to the restaurant Wendy's, there's no Wendy behind the counter, right? It's Wendy's. And that's kind of how our government has been in the past. Now, Donald Trump is the exception to that, of course. And Obama was the face of the government, the talking head of the government. But behind the scenes, what was really happening? Now, they tried to do it with Biden. It just didn't work because the man was just too far gone. But with Obama, look at all the things that happened, all of the foreign policies we got into, all of the disconnect that took place, all of the socialism that was brought in under Obama, all of the Islam that was brought in under Obama. And most people just turn a blind eye to it, quite honestly. I think a lot of you probably realize that. Mary says we can always use good police. Come here. Well, Mary, I don't know that I want all the New Yorkers to come here. If they're a New York police officer and they have share the same values of us, maybe. In fact, Governor Greg Abbott of Texas, he doesn't want New Yorkers there at all. He said, if my and I meant to talk about this yesterday. He said if Mamdani wins the mayoral race in New York City, New Yorkers are not welcome here in the state of Texas. And if they come here, he's going to charge them 100% tariffs for a New Yorker to come to Texas because he thought they should have fought harder to win. And I don't know that New Yorkers were necessarily complacent, Republicans or conservatives. I think that we're just fighting a losing battle when it comes to socialism and Islam. It is a losing battle. And I think it's because it's just uneducation. It's just uneducation. Now, of course, if a Democrat, liberal is watching this show, they're probably calling me the uneducated one, that I'm the one that doesn't understand what's going on. I watch countless videos. I'm not going to play them because there's far too many. You go out and see them for yourself of New Yorkers at the polls being interviewed by different people who saying, yes, I want socialism. They literally are saying, yes, I want socialism. It's not that they don't know they're voting for socialism. I don't think that they understand what exactly is going to happen with socialism as it continues to trickle down. I don't think they get it. I watched one video, and some of you may have seen it also. There was a man and woman heading into the polls, and they said, yeah, grocery prices are too high. I'm tired of paying $5 for a pound of potatoes. There shouldn't be any ultra wealthy people in this country. If you're a millionaire or a billionaire, there shouldn't be a such thing as millionaires and billionaires. We need to, it's all about spreading the wealth. Now, when did that start? Back with Bernie Sanders, right? Remember when Bernie Sanders used to talk about that? But really, it really started with Obama. And people want to say Sanders, and Sanders kind of came up out of the ashes of that. But it was really Obama, because Obama, and people disagree with me, and I don't really care because I've got the video proof to show it. But Obama truly did say back in the day, this is a long time ago, but he did say that he wanted to create an army of citizens that were as equally powerful, equally armed, and I can't remember what, equally trained, I believe it was, equally funded as the United States military. And that's how he got involved with a group called Public Allies. If you go back and look, a lot of people do. If you listen to this show, you probably know about Public Allies. If you don't listen or haven't listened for a while, you probably have no idea what Public Allies is. But Public Allies, it's a group of activists. He in the Obamas were co-founders of the branch in Chicago. This was long before Obama, of course, became president of the country. And this was back, I'm quite certain, after the grooming already took place, while the grooming was occurring. And it's the likes of George Soros and all of his cronies that trained Obama and made Obama be as eloquent as he is. Why? To fool the American people into voting for him. And more than anything, to fool the Democrats. There's some of us they know they could never fool, but they absolutely can and have fooled the Democrats. Now we have a whole group of people in this country who want to vote for socialism. They want socialism. They want Islam. They don't have any problem with that. They don't even understand what they're getting themselves into. Good morning, Elizabeth. Jay says, plenty of conservatives in New York, just like Illinois. We don't stand a chance. Jay, in Illinois, we were closer in Illinois than most people would imagine. What was it, 4%? I can't remember. I get California and Illinois mixed up. One was 11% and one was 4% between Gavin Newsom and being reelected, and Pritzker being reelected. But either way, 11% and 4% is very close. It's very close. Cuomo, at 41.6%. That was very close. And then you have to ask yourself, well, really, how much was organic? Was it an organic win, or was there some funny business that went on? We know in New York City, there's a lot of talk about different things that took place to potentially give Mamdani that lead. Whether it's true or not, I don't know, but it certainly sounds like it. A lot of harassment going on at the polling locations. A lot of people turned away, people saying there was no more ballots at different locations. And good morning, Robert. And Nancy says, then move out. That's right. And Jay says, poor people don't create businesses or hire workers. True. And, I listen, speaking of that, Jay, that's one of the things that some of these people were talking about heading into the polls to vote for Mamdani is they said they want everyone, and this is what socialism about. They said they want everyone to be equal, everyone to be equal. And I don't think they understand what that means, everyone to be equal under true socialism rules, Marxist rules. They think that everyone will be equal, that everybody is going to get that, hand up so that we're all on the same playing field. But you know what that means? That means if you're one of the wealthier people, or even just moderately, a little bit at middle class, just a moderately above, the lowest income, then guess what? They're going to take money from you and give it to those people. And the higher up you get, the more money and the more things they're going to take for you and give it to the others so that everybody's on that level playing field, so that everybody has the same opportunity. But they don't realize how far that stretches. We've talked about that before, where Mamdani wants these government ran grocery stores, which is just a disaster in the making. It's going to, like I said yesterday, it's going to look good at first. People are going to think, oh, that's a really good idea. Look, people are eating, people have food. People who couldn't otherwise afford to have nice groceries have better groceries, because guess what? The person who is working harder and making more money is paying for them to have better groceries. That's all it is. It's taking from this group of people and giving it to this group of people. And then guess what happens? Eventually, these people over here who have said, I am working really hard, but the harder I work, the more of my money I have to give to these people who aren't working at all. And then the next thing you know, these people say, forget it. Why should I work so hard and do all of this and would just to give everything I earn to this group of people over here? It's a failed system. It will never, ever work. And when you start out a situation where you have government ran grocery stores, you're going to have very limited choices, because guess what? They don't want, a lot of times, they don't want name brands, because they don't want somebody to say, okay, well, I'm going to pay $6 for a box of, let's say, shredded wheats, name brand shredded wheats, or I'm going to pay $3 for a box of generic shredded wheats. They don't do that. Everything's the same price. So you're going to have two different boxes of cereal. They're both going to be $4, and those are your only options. You just have no other choices. You have what they give you, or you don't have anything at all. And I don't think people understand what they're getting themselves into. And Pam says, has nobody in New York paid attention to life in Cuba? They have. And I'm glad you mentioned that, Pam. And what it's like to live in socialism. As they were polling these people that were coming through to vote, they were asking people, so which is your favorite socialist country? And one guy actually said Cuba. He's like, oh, yeah, Cuba, absolutely, all the way. No, they know exactly what they're doing. They do. They know exactly. They don't know what they're going to, they don't know the end result. That's where the confusion is. But they think they've been told, they've been groomed, they've been brainwashed to think that socialism is a good thing. That if you're somebody who isn't out there putting in that effort, if you're not successful, then that success is going to come your way. That's what they're telling people. Oh, you went to college for a 4-year degree. You have what, $200,000 in debt from your college education. You can't find a job in English literature or whatever some of these idiots are going to school for. And then all of a sudden, guess what? Well, you're going to be successful. If you vote for Mamdani and we bring socialism in, we're going to take from this guy over here and give it to you. So you also will be successful. It's insane. People don't get it. Drew says, what did I tell you? Donald Trump is officially a lame duck. Wrong, Drew, wrong. People are tired of these high prices. Young people can't even buy homes. The average age to purchase a home is 40 now. Now, Drew, I don't disagree with you on a lot of what you're saying here. People cannot afford to survive. There's no question about it. People cannot afford to survive. But what is the answer? The answer is not taking from one group of people and giving it to another. That is not the answer. Yes, we absolutely have to work on lowering the price of food items. Things have to balance out one way or the other. We either force companies to pay higher wages so that people can afford to pay their rent or their mortgage payment or their taxes. In a lot of cases, if you live in the great state of Illinois, guess what? You're paying an awful lot of property taxes. Your house value, you might have paid less for your home, but it's going to make up on the other end in taxes. I do still think buying a home in Illinois is the better option versus Missouri. I know people think that's crazy, and Jay, I know you're going to think it's crazy, but you can buy a much larger home for the price in Illinois. And in Missouri, of course, you have your personal property taxes. Illinois doesn't have personal property taxes, and yes, you're going to end up paying a lot of money in property taxes in Illinois. But if you look at the overall picture, at let's say at the end of the month, you're paying $5,000 a month in Illinois, you're paying $5,000 a month in Missouri. You're going to have a bigger home in Illinois for that $5,000 a month, which is why I chose to uproot from Missouri to Illinois. Of course, it's not a big decision for me because I'm from Chicago, so I'm not totally alien to the state of Illinois, just this general Metro East area. But Drew, you're right. People have to be able to afford, but I don't think that's what's pushing the people over, because a lot of the people who are voting for these socialist policies, it is young people, but a lot of it's the older boomers. The people who were at one point the hippies and so on. They're the people who are voting in all this socialism. Same people who very heavily supported Bernie Sanders, because that's what Bernie Sanders was all about. I guess it went from free love to free money and housing, right? And Linda, a family member fighting cancer and paying huge tariffs to get it. Yeah, that's also a shame, Linda. We've got a lot of work to do in this country. I still think Donald Trump is the right answer. I'll never change my mind on that. But we have a lot of work to do. And I do think that, I know Trump made a statement. I didn't save it to read to you. You can read it later, but he was kind of yelling in a way at Congress saying, hey, we need to get the government open. Let's get busy. Let's get the government open. Let's do what we need to do. He was very upset with Congress for not getting this bill passed. But at the same time, Trump has been very focused on foreign policy. And I understand why. He's looking at the bigger picture. He's looking at rare earth minerals. He's looking at bringing a military base potentially to Nigeria. That's some new information. And he's looking at ending the drugs coming into this country, the human trafficking, the drug trafficking. He's working on some really important things. But also, we need a little bit more attention here in the United States. We need a little bit more America first. And that has to come from somewhere. And I know Donald Trump's been working again on some very important projects, but I do wish he'd kind of step aside and make a speech and tell Americans, hey, I know you're hurting. I know, because Donald Trump represents all Americans, not just conservatives, not just Republicans, all Americans. And he needs to make a speech that says, I know that my people, the Americans, are hurting. I understand that, what is it? The average car price right now, I just read, was $50,000. There's several million people right now who are on the verge of having their cars repossessed because they can no longer make the payments. They're in negative equity. Think about that, negative equity in your vehicle. You go to trade your vehicle in and you actually owe more than what your vehicle is worth. There's over, 6.5 million people right now who are late on at least one house payment. There are people who cannot afford to go to buy their groceries. Now, I don't think this has anything to do with people not being able to afford to buy groceries, but if you're familiar with Collinsville, Illinois, there was a woman yesterday who left the Walmart in Collinsville with her cart of groceries, was walking her cart to her car, and she was robbed by three men. And what did they take? They took her cart of groceries and they got away. I don't think they've been caught, but they took her groceries. Now, I don't think that has anything to do with SNAP. I think maybe they might use SNAP benefits being suspended, as the excuse. But we live in a crazy place right now, a super crazy place. And as a matter of fact, I'm still gonna be talking a little bit more about Mamdani, because Mamdani wants. This is how I'm using Mamdani as an example of how so many Americans think right now, where they're okay with crime. If it's not violent crime, they don't even think these people should go to jail. Stealing this woman's groceries, if you live in New York City, going forward, that's not going to be a crime, just so you know. It is not going to be a crime. I'll show you that video here in a minute. And Jay says, look at socialism, what it did to Venezuela. Jay, that's the absolute perfect example, because we do see, Venezuela was once a very, beautiful, wonderful country. People were very happy and living their best lives there. And then guess what? The next thing you know, guess what happened? Socialism enters the mix with Nicolas Maduro. And then what happens? You have citizens, I'm sure you guys remember, citizens burning their Venezuelan money in the streets to keep warm. eating out of trash cans. There were interviews I watched where there were people who, prior to this, had the big crash brought on by socialism. They were very wealthy people, and they're like, we're eating out of trash cans. There is no food. Why? Because they had government ran grocery stores. There was no food, and people just do not get it. And Robert says, is New York City experiencing the Curly effect? See my Facebook post. Oh, I will do that, Robert. I don't know what the Curly effect is. I will be happy to look and see. And good morning, Phyllis. And I believe, Phyllis, was it you that just had an anniversary? I think so. And Jay says, taking money and redistributing it creates inflation. Yes, of course it does. It creates a whole lot of bad things. Mandy says, all they hear is the word free. Mandy, that's exactly 100% correct, because there were people also who were being interviewed who said, hey, I'm going to get free stuff. They literally said that, free stuff. I'm here for the free stuff, because you know what? They're going to take from you, give to the other person. And yes, you might have worked for it, but it's going to be free for that person. It's really, really crazy. And let's see here. Jay says it's against Trump, and I'd wager many of those who voted for him was the only reason they can articulate. Probably so. And Nancy says, stop funding other countries. Nancy, I'm 100% with you on that. That is probably my largest disagreement with Trump in some of the things that he's been doing. Again, I will always say he's the best president we have and have had, 1,000 times better than what we would have gotten with Kamala Harris or anyone else. I can't even think of anybody that would be better, quite honestly, as a president. However, there are things that he does that I don't like. I don't like the funding of other countries. Why are we, now we sent that $40 million to Argentina. Now that was to get Milei elected. Don't think anything different. Nigeria, we talk about putting boots on the ground. Well, guess what? Today, nope, we really just want to put a base there, because of course we want their rare earth minerals. We talked a little bit about that yesterday. There's always that facade of what something is, and then there's the reality behind it, because no matter who we have as president, we never have 100% transparency. I really wish that Donald Trump would say, hey, we really need Milei to get elected over, in Argentina. And if we don't do something about it, guess what? We're going to have some real big problems in that area that's going to affect us. So let's give $40 million to Argentina, make sure he gets elected. We'd be like, oh, okay, we get it. Not, oh, let's just send $40 million to Argentina to rise them up out of the crisis that they're currently facing, to stabilize their economy, when we're all like, well, why don't we stabilize our own economy first? Oh, it's frustrating. And Jay says housing prices have nothing to do with Trump. It's groups like BlackRock driving the prices up. Oh, Jay, you're 100% correct about that. But there are things that the Trump administration can do about companies like BlackRock, because if you're familiar with BlackRock, then, which most of you, if not all of you, are, what they do, of course, is their funding is unlimited. It is literally unlimited. You cannot fight back against BlackRock. BlackRock comes into a neighborhood and they're paying cash. They offer 20, 30, 40% more than what you're asking for your home. And who wouldn't, of course, sell to them? But you don't necessarily know it's BlackRock you're dealing with, because BlackRock owns so many different subsidiaries, so many different companies. And you'll see them if you go out and just look at rentals, because they're not reselling the houses, they're renting them out. Keep that in mind. When BlackRock buys a home, they're not reselling it, they're renting it out. So if you go and look at rentals, you'll start seeing the pattern of all these different companies that are out there renting all these houses. They'll have a large number of houses for rent, and you'll see that they never rent them out. You'll see that same house sitting there on the market for months and months and months. And the reason why is because BlackRock buys all these homes. Their goal is to buy up your entire neighborhood. Because they want to jack up the prices, of course. But what they're really doing, and I don't think enough is discussed about this. I tried to talk to Eric Schmidt when he was our attorney general about this, but it's a much bigger, complex problem, than what, and he did deal with it somewhat. But what they're doing is they're putting a house out on the market for rent. Let's say the renter, you're looking to buy a home. So you're going out there, you're filling out applications. Sorry. I'm still having some residual effects from my biopsy, so I apologize. My lungs have been through a lot the past couple days. So anyway, you're out there, you're buying a home or you're looking to rent a home and you say, "Okay, well this looks like a really nice home. My family would love this." Yes, it's really high. It's like $2,500 a month for a 3-bedroom house. And yes, let's say St. Charles, Missouri. So you contact this company who claims, let's say First Key, that's one of the companies that's out there. You contact First Key and you say, "Okay, I want to rent this home from you." They say, "Okay, fill out your application, pay your application fee." So let's say it's $100 per person. So you're paying $100. Your significant other is paying $100. If you have a child over 18, they're paying $100 for the application fee. And then you never hear anything back. Weeks go by. You reach out to them. "Oh, well, we haven't made a decision yet," or you don't qualify for whatever, reason that makes no sense. Well, then what all they're doing is collecting all of those application fees. They make more money on application fees than they would ever make in actually renting that house out. So after it sits on the market for, let's say, 5, 6 months or something, then they'll eventually rent it out, but for so a hugely exorbitant price. And then what happens then? Then your neighbor, all of a sudden, their house is worth more, and that if they rent their house out, would be higher. And of course, who wouldn't? If you live in a house and you've lived there for a number of years, your mortgage payment is, let's say, $1,200, but the house next to you just rented out for $2,500, wouldn't you move and rent your house out? That's like a free $1,000 that would pay for wherever it is you're going to go live next. And it's taken over the country, and we know that's all part of socialism because they don't want you to own a home. They do not want you to own a home. They want you to pay these exorbitant rental costs. And sorry, I know I went on a tangent there and I could go on a longer one because I'm so frustrated with it. Jay says it all depends on where you buy in Illinois. Possibly also true. Jay, I live out in the middle of nowhere. Robert, first London and now New York City. Jihad in plain view. Stupid people like Drew. I honestly think Drew would have voted for Mom Donnie had he had the opportunity. And and by the way, let's not lose the fact that Drew, did you vote for Kara Spencer? Probably not. But I'll tell you what, Kara Spencer in St. Louis City, she's a socialist. She has no problems telling people that she's a socialist. I mean, we interviewed her, back on the edge back then. She is a socialist. I've not heard it get any widespread attention that St. Louis, voted for a socialist mayor, but it happened. And there were a lot of people, obviously, that voted her because she won. She's still probably the better option of Tashora Jones, though. So I can't say we can say too much about that. And let's see. Mary says, "Not me. I'm old. Never vote for socialism." Yeah, Mary. Not all. I don't know if you're a boomer or not. I don't know how old you are. Not certainly not all boomers, would vote for socialism, but there's a lot of them who would. And I know these people. A lot of it's quite honestly, it's older white women. It's so strange. I don't know what's happened. I really don't know what's happened. And Jay says our medical system is the problem, not tariffs. Well, the medical system all around is definitely a problem. We've got a lot of problems, a lot of problems. Drew says all the people who voted for Donald Trump last year switched because of tariffs has made everything much higher. Well, the tariffs have not really, in my opinion, I don't personally see any prices raised because of the tariffs. Not personally. Our gas, it's not as low as it was during Donald Trump's last term, but it's higher than that. But there are people around the country who paid $1.20, I've heard $1.25 for gas. Not in my area, we haven't, but it's not outrageous right now. Gasoline prices aren't outrageous. Food prices are ridiculous. Yesterday I paid $25 for a little tiny roast because to make some vegetable beef soup. And I'm like, this is crazy. The same roast would have been like 11, 10 or $11, just a couple years ago. Now it's $25. So beef by far, and beef is expected to continue to go up. Find some chicken recipes. Find some chicken recipes. You can still get a whole, you can still go to the grocery store and get a whole chicken for about $9, $10. And chicken's far better for you than beef anyway. But I'm joking, of course, but Donald Trump is going to come up with a plan. He's already working on a plan. He is going to come up with a plan to lower food prices. But I will promise you, socialism is absolutely not the answer. It is not the answer to food prices. And Dottie says, my internet jumped $13 a month. Dottie, my internet is outrageous here also. It's like 100 and something dollars a month. And it's not even good internet, which is crazy. Pam says, Drew Collins, everything was expensive before Trump and came into office. Remember? That's right, Pam. Exactly. You tell him. Robert says, tariffs costs were negligible to zero at the consumer level as they were paid by the exporter. Higher prices as a result of money printed during COVID and the green recession of 2007, 2008. Yeah, I trust me, I've been buying a lot of stuff. I've got a separate side project I'm working on, which we'll talk about eventually. And I have been spending a ton of money on this stuff, and I haven't noticed the prices any too much higher because of tariffs. And a lot of stuff I have to order is from overseas because they don't make it here in the United States because we don't manufacture things here, right? That ended with NAFTA. And and Robert says, let's see. Oh, Vernon says gosh, I can't talk. Raising wage doesn't work every time. Minimum wage goes up, goods go up, so you don't get ahead. You're right, Vernon. I don't really know if there is a way to get ahead. I felt like we were ahead during Trump's last term. I know we have it in us in the Trump administration to get these things done, but they're being fought every step of the way. And that's what Trump's little, tirade today on Truth Social was about, and very understandably so. He's in the right that if we don't step up now and do something, instead of voting all these Democrats, socialist Democrats, into office all across, and it's happening all across the country. It's happening in Minnesota, St. Louis, happening obviously Virginia. We're going to talk more about Virginia, New Jersey, also. But that certainly it is not the way. It is not the way. And Robert says raising wages will always raise prices greater than the increase as business is a cost plus unless productivity is greater than the increase, but productivity improvements also have an upfront cost. Everything costs money, unfortunately, but it's out of hand right now. Mary says, the screen, oh yeah, at Mom Donnie's victory party was hacked. I saw that with Trump as your president. I almost saved that video, but I didn't. But yeah, the screen came up and said Trump is your president. Took a couple minutes for anybody to notice, and everybody booed it because, of course, God forbid you have freedom in the country when you only want socialism. Mary says 73 boomer. Oh, good for you, Mary. Well, I am glad that you're on our side and not theirs. That is for sure. And and Larry says, you will own nothing and you will be happy, quote unquote. You got that one right, Larry, because that is exactly what they want. They don't want you to own anything, anything. I just watched a video today. I'm not going to play it for you guys. It was longer, but it was talking about their agenda 2030, that 30-year agenda Democrats have. Well, they're right on track. Even with Donald Trump in office, they're right on track because bringing socialism in is part of their agenda, their 2030 agenda. Bringing people into the inner cities is what they want to do. They don't want you to live in a rural area. They want everybody to be centered in the city. And this video I watched talked about how part of the 2030 agenda is accounting for every single citizen, making sure you have real ID, which of course was a product of Hillary Clinton, making sure that every citizen is marked and numbered. You're not a person anymore. You're a mark, you're a number. And then they're going to try their best to increase taxes, make it very difficult for people to live in rural areas while they herd everybody into the main cities. Now, I don't know what they're going to do with the rural areas, turn them into data centers. I truly have no idea. But they don't want us living out there. They want us all living in the inner cities. And Larry says, what blew my mind is the fact that the Jewish community voted for Mamdani. I'm a little bit confused by that too, Larry. I'm confused by that, and I'm confused by the LGBTQ support for Mamdani, for what's going on in Virginia, for a lot of different places, because I don't know. This is where the big disconnect is. If you are of Christian faith, if you are of Jewish faith, if you're any other religion other than Islam, why would you vote for Mamdani? Because obviously they do not believe in the freedom of religion. They just don't. And that's just the way it is. And I'm going to play a video and I'm going to show you exactly what I'm talking about. How this ties together with Mamdani. The more I say it, the less I'm going to be able to say it. But if you're a part of the LGBTQ community, guess what? They want you dead. Truly, they want you dead. It's not that they just don't like you. They actually want to kill you because everything you're doing, the way you live your life is so far away from what they view as being holy, you're not even allowed to exist. And so I don't understand it. And there were plenty of people I saw in that line being interviewed that were part of the LGBTQ community. And that's when I'm like, my mind is like blown. Like, what are you people doing? Okay, so I'm gonna play this video for you because otherwise I'm gonna end up talking for the next 5 hours because I could talk about this stuff all day. So here's where we're going with a lot of this. Now, I saved these. For some reason, when I save these videos, they don't always come up. Okay, well, first let's talk about Mamdani and crime. You know, when you go to New York City, how about this? How about just don't go to New York at all? Just don't even bother going to New York because you're open to being a victim if you travel through New York under Mamdani. Because guess what? He doesn't believe if it's not violent crime, if it's not serious violent crime, you're not a criminal. You don't belong in prison. He says it himself. You can hear his own words.
Oftentimes, we've even found as legislators, when we go into these courts, the term violent crime is even used when people are stealing packages. Violent crime is even used when people are accused of burglary and there happens to be a housing unit in that same dwelling. So violence is an artificial construction. And we have to be very clear that what is happening here with these district attorneys, that is violence. That is violence of the highest degree.
See, yeah, okay. Well, if you're a criminal, you know what is really a criminal? Stealing? No, not really a criminal. The people who arrest you are the criminals. That's how Mamdani feels. Now, this is the guy who's going to be making the rules. You know, if I were in New York, I'd leave. I absolutely would leave, and I will not be visiting. And I hate it because I love New York City. I absolutely love it. I will not be. I just thought the other day, I'm like, man, I would really like to go back to New York City for a visit. Nope, not anymore. Not anymore. Because the police, what's going to happen to police in New York City now? They're not going to be supported. They are absolutely not going to be supported. And I don't know what's going to happen. Like you said, it's going to be a very interesting experiment to see how things move going forward. If I was a police officer, I would hang up my hat today. I'd go move to a different area and get another job. I would leave New York City. Let them have it. If the people voted for Mamdani, guess what? Let them have him. Let them have it. Because yes, those were that clearly that's not AI. He was literally saying that, you know, the police, the people who arrest you, they're the criminals. You're just having a hard time getting by. You have to steal. You have to commit crime. But that's not really a crime. You don't belong in jail for committing those crimes because you're not the criminal. Sometimes I really do feel like we're living in a simulation. Larry says it's the same mindset that when the 67 war broke out in Israel, captured the Temple Mount and then gave it back to the Muslims. What the hell is wrong with these people? Clearly not an understanding of the reality of the situation. Larry says New York's going to burn. Yes, it probably is. I want to show you something else too. First, I've got to really look at these because I'm sorry. I know I'm getting up close and personal here to look, but since I had my surgery, I can't see very well. Like it messed up one of my eyes, so I can't. I have to lean in. It'll eventually clear out. I had really high blood pressure during the last part of that surgery, and so my body's a little off. But I'm going to play this for you because guess what? This group that I'm going to replay this video for, they put a big effort through to make sure Mamdani won. Now you've got to ask why. And I'm going to tell you exactly why.
We're done hiding. We're done. We're done being tortured and hurt and judged. This is the correct religion. This is the religion that all of humanity needs to be upon, of Islam. And we will not stop until it enters every home. So I want you to repeat after me. I want to hear it in every single district. It should tremble. Brooklyn should hear it. The Bronx should hear it. Queens should hear it. Say it as if the Ummah depends on this, my brothers and sisters. La ilaha illallah.
Every household, you heard it for yourself, every household. And that's what Mamdani wants to, you know, and I'm not trying to be down on the Muslims today. You know, like I said at the beginning of the show, you know, Mamdani is a Shiite Muslim. He is not a Sunni Muslim. If he was a Sunni Muslim, we would be having a whole different conversation here about terrorism and terrorism coming into our country. But again, and I'm just going to remind people who were not here in the earlier part of the show, that when it comes to Islamic terrorism, there are no, I mean, some people will say, well, there are Shiite terror groups because you have like Hezbollah, you have Hamas, you have the Houthis. but those are paramilitary groups. Some people refer to them as terrorists. They are paramilitary groups. But then we have the Sunni terrorists. 99% of the world's terrorists are Sunni. Not that Sunni are predominantly terrorists. It's that terror groups are predominantly Sunni. There's more Sunnis who are, of course, not terror related or radicalized. So Mamdani is not a Sunni. If he was a Sunni, I would be extremely alarmed. We'd be talking about terrorism right now instead of socialism, and instead of just the fact that they want Islam in every single home. That is what Mamdani wants, and don't think he doesn't. And Mandy says, nope, nope, nope. Good luck, New York. Nancy says, God help us, Robert. I worry New York City will now be a magnet for Muslims worldwide to reside in and take more towns over. It's a religious war centuries in the making. Well, Robert, you and I must be thinking alike right now, because I'm going to show you something here. And, 10 years ago in the UK, they had their first Muslim mayor. Now let's look at what things look like 10 years later. All right, so that's over in London, 10 years after they elected their first Muslim mayor. I think we see exactly what's coming to New York. Now, if you're a Muslim and you're living your best life here in America, you appreciate our Constitution and appreciate our values. You're not running around in a burqa or a hijab, then welcome. I'm glad you're here. We need more good people. But if you're one of the other folks that's becoming more radicalized to say that we want to eliminate Christianity, we want to eliminate, all of these other religions, and we want Islam in every home, then no, we're going to fight back. We're not going to just be complacent and allow our Christianity in this country to be taken away from us. It's not going to happen, but it can happen. We've got to see. I just read an article this morning over in the UK where there were a group of school children going on a field trip to the Science Museum, which is kind of funny. It reminded me as a kid, growing up in the Chicago area, we took our field trips to the Museum of Science and Industry, which was just an amazing thing to do as a kid, or, to the Shed Aquarium, or, some of these other places. Well, these kids, their parents were told, well, when you pack their lunches, make sure their lunches do not contain nuts. Obviously, a lot of kids have nut allergies. No coconut. Are people allergic to coconut? I didn't get the no coconut, but no pork. They're not allowed to bring pork in their school lunches. Now, there would be no other reason for that. No other reason for that other than religion. There would be absolutely no other reason. And Dottie, you wonder what happened with the 9/11 memorial. A lot of people have asked that on X, I saw this morning. What happens? Where do we go from here? There's a lot of people wondering, where do we go from here? And I do expect you to see changes. I really do expect you to see changes. And I know somebody, I don't see where the comment is. I know somebody had asked about the Christmas parade and the holiday thing. We have the big Macy's parade. I don't know. Because I can guarantee you that Mamdani does not support having a Christian holiday. Now, I think they'll still have, our Christian holidays in New York City. And it'll take a while before we see those drastic changes. But you know what? I know we've talked a lot about Mamdani and excuse me, New York City. But we had a lot of other Democrat wins too. Also not expected. New Jersey, we had Mike Sherrill winning again, not unexpected. Virginia. Now, Virginia, of course, is an extremely liberal state in general. And in Virginia, we had Governor Abigail Spanberger, of course, won. No surprise there. Attorney General Jay Jones, also another Democrat. Now, here's one that kind of goes along with the theme of what we're already talking about. Ghazala Hashmi. She is the first Muslim woman elected to a statewide office as Virginia's lieutenant governor. Now, I'm going to play you a little video here of Hashma. Let's see if I can find it. Here we go.
Assalamu alaikum. Peace be upon you all. I'm so delighted to be back with you at this year's Jalsa Salana. I had the privilege of joining you last year, and it left a lasting impression on me, one of the unique spirituality, community service, and love of humanity. Today marks a special occasion, as we know, the 75th diamond anniversary of the Jalsa Salana here in the United States, and what an incredible milestone. You know, this gathering is not only America's longest and oldest Muslim convention, it is in fact a reflection of the strength, the endurance, and the
Okay, so that is, I'm not going to play that whole speech. That is the new lieutenant governor of the state of Virginia, the first female Muslim to have a position statewide. The banner behind her says, he has named us, or no, he has named you Muslims. And so we see the direction things are going. Again, it is not against people of the Islamic faith. At least not to me, it's not. You know, I have friends who are Muslim who live just like we do. You know, they're living their lives, they're going to school, they're going to work, they have children, they're participating in all these different things. They live no different at all than we do. They're not running around in a hijab or a burqa or anything else. They're just living their lives. But yes, they still, at heart are of the Islam faith. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. Absolutely nothing wrong with that. I am 100% for the freedom of religion. What I am against is no-go zones. I am against taking away other people's rights for your religion, whatever that religion might be. And that includes Christians. You know, we have no right to trample on other people's religion either. But when you're going to close down the street to pray 5 times a day, then yes, I'm going to have a problem with it. If you don't allow dogs to walk through your neighborhood because you, by your religion, feel that they're dirty, yes, I have a problem with it. You're taking away my right to walk my dog through your neighborhood because of your religion. And if you're telling me that I have to wear a black burqa or a hijab here in the United States to go to certain places, I'm going to say no. I'm not going to do that. You know, it's not just about Islam. It's not just about being a faith. It's not about religion. Remember back in the day, you know, there's always been a group who has to tell another group, no, you can't do this because you violate my rights. I feel as a Christian conservative, I can't recall a time where I've ever told somebody, you can't live the way you want because it violates my rights. You know, if you want to be part of the LGBTQ community, go ahead. It doesn't violate my rights for you to do that. Don't force me to do it, you know, but you can do whatever it is you want to do. You know, if you want to hold a drag show in the town square, do whatever you want to do, you know, but you can't force me to go. You can't force me to see it if I don't want to see it. You know, it's just like there's always been a group of people who's trying to enforce their rights upon us to where we are just trying to live our lives. But then they want to come along and say, nope, nope, nope. You living your life is not good enough. You have to accept us for this, this, or this. You know, and that there's a bazillion different examples I could give of that without going too far with it. Rob says, New York City is just the start. I'm glad I'm older than 50 and over halfway done. It is just the start. It is the beginning, Rob, of something that we have not yet seen. But this is what happens. You know, it's historical. Look back at history. Look at history. It's historical. You know, at one time there were the Crusades, right? You know, each group has their heyday. And we're heading into a time where I think here in America, even though Christianity is growing worldwide, Islam is growing too. And it's going to certainly grow here in the United States. And it starts to be a problem for me when people take away my rights. I remember when the atheists came out and the atheists were like, okay, Christians, you can no longer have your nativity scene at the town square. You can never have your nativity scene at the courthouse or at a school. You can't bring Bibles to school. You can't bring a cross or any other Christian insignia, you know, into the classrooms. You can't pray in school. Then it got to the point where people in schools were like, you can't even say the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag, because if you do, it's racist. It's like I'm like, oh, losing my mind. Like, what is happening in this country? So this is just another historical moment, another historical road we're going to go down. And I guess we'll all see how far down that road we go. And then sure enough, someday, however far this goes, enough people will be oppressed by it that they'll rise up and they'll go the opposite direction. It'll probably be long past my time. I think that Islamic rule in some of these areas is here to stay, and I think we're going to see a lot more of it because you know why? It has nothing to do with Islam. Do you think George Soros is Islamic? Do you think he cares about Islam? Do you think he cares about Sharia law or the people like George Soros? No, of course not. They're just giving us all something to squabble about and something to worry about to keep us divided while in the meantime, they become more wealthy and more powerful. The people who control what's happening in our country, the people who pull the strings, the shadow government, whatever you want to call those people, they don't care. They could care less about now socialism. They like socialism because it keeps people under their thumb. They don't care about religion. They're most of them are atheists anyway. Do you think George Soros is truly lives by his faith? No, of course he doesn't. Of course he doesn't. Mark, Hitler was a socialist, yes. And you're going to see what's so funny is that they call Trump Hitler. They refer to conservatives as Hitler, but yet, or as fascists. And we've always known it was the opposite of that. Now we're seeing it play out in real life, aren't we? We're seeing it play out in real life. A couple other things I wanted to get to today. Let's see here. I talked about the lady robbed from groceries. Senator Kennedy has introduced a bill. I'm with him on this. I like Senator Kennedy. I agree with a lot of things that he does and a lot of things that he says. And I think he's a really funny person in general. He wants to suspend the paychecks of Congress. I am 100% behind that. Suspend the paychecks of Congress. I think they should anyway. I think they should reduce the paychecks of Congress. If I really wanted to say what I really think, I would say let's just get rid of them all, wipe the board clean, and start all over again. There's nobody there. I don't even know if I would keep anyone, maybe one or two people. The rest of them can go. We'll start all over. We'll elect real people for Congress, and we'll make sure that why isn't there a law that says Congress cannot get kickbacks? Congress cannot trade stocks. Congress cannot gain any money at all while they're sitting in that seat. Well, guess what? We'd have a lot. We'd have a lot less folks sitting in Congress and trying to be congressmen, wouldn't we? That is for sure. And New Mexico, first state, and more socialism. Now, you might disagree with me on this, but New Mexico, the first state, free childcare for everyone. While it's great to have free childcare because God knows people need it. I worked during my time when I was a single mother with my son, and childcare back then was extremely expensive, and it's even more expensive now. But that's another form of socialism when you have free childcare for everyone. But it's coming. It's coming. And Pam says Senator Kennedy is hilarious. He is. I like some of his statements he's made about UFOs. I'm always watching that UFO coverage. Of course I am. And he's been pretty out there, and pretty open about a lot of things. Remember whenever we had the Chinese spy balloon that was coming across the country, and all of a sudden, here's this Chinese spy balloon, but there's all these other objects seen, people calling them, UFOs, UAPs. One was shot down, remember that, over the Yukon. And they were not able, either they were not able to recover it, or it just took them a long time to find it. They eventually did recover it. But at that time, Senator Kennedy was very forthright, and he gave an interview, and he said, I'd be afraid. I'd be locking my doors at night because he knew there was something on that ship that crashed. He knew, and he told us. And then people still think, oh, he was just joking. That man was not joking. And Mary, would you trust the government with child? Gosh, no, Mary. I don't trust the government with anything. Not even the government under Trump. I don't trust them with anything. Nope. Would not want them teaching my child anything. I see what the government did. Remember back in the day when everything changed, when they said, oh, there's no more spankings. Now it's timeouts. That was like the beginning of what we're seeing today. That was all at the hands of the government. That was their doing. Pam says free childcare gets everyone attention. That is all. Empty promises. Yep, probably so, Pam. Probably so. The last thing I really want to talk about today. I believe this is it. I wanted to talk about that UPS jet that crashed. I heard today that they've given a final, what I assume is a final count of 7 people, 7 casualties, 7 deaths that resulted of that. But I don't know, have you guys heard? I've been watching the news, not watching physically watching, but watching what I've been reading and looking for different people I know to pop through, and I haven't heard any cause as of yet. And when I first saw the crash, I kept thinking, is this really a crash? And then some people got upset with me over on Threads, where all the liberal loonies live, over on the Threads app. They're like, how dare you talk about it might be a terror attack? I'm like, I never even said that it might be a terror attack. What I did say, and I stick to saying this, is that yesterday was a really strange day. There were bomb threats that were called into at least one airport in Washington, D.C., and maybe others. There were several bomb threats called in to different polling locations in New Jersey. There was a lot that was going on yesterday. Now, this was a UPS jet. Obviously, it's a cargo jet. And what I also said is that no, I don't necessarily think it was a bomb. In fact, I think it probably was not. But at the same time, it looks kind of, when you look at the fire, it looks like it was maybe an engine on fire. But we know cargo jets. I have a friend who is a pilot of a cargo jet, and back in the day, he used to explain to me that we fly all kinds of stuff around. There's a lot of dangerous material that gets flown around on these cargo jets. So it's not an unusual idea that something could potentially catch on fire. They do as many screenings of objects as they can. They try to make sure everything's situated and packaged well, so things like that don't happen. But especially in the day now of lithium batteries and everything else oh, thank you, Charlie. They've updated it to 9. And Charlie, I don't know what you think, but I think there will probably be more, because it was a pretty horrific situation. I'm going to play a front seat video for you here in just a moment. Robert says, government overlords? An oxymoron. Yes. And I'm going to play a video for you. And you probably have seen this online. And this is a horrific crash. And quite honestly, it's not easy to watch, because that people lost their lives in this crash. And I just want to know what caused it. Was it an engine failure? That's kind of what it appears. I'm not going to show the video of the back end where you see the fire right when it's getting ready to take off. But clearly the plane caught on fire and it was not able to lift off. And when it wasn't able to lift off, and from this angle, you'll be able to see it kind of rolls and then bursts into flames. So earmuffs for anyone that's got children around, or if you don't like foul language. Some of you have probably seen this video, but there is a truck driver who was sitting in his truck taking a break, and he's got his camera, which is of course forward facing, and he sees the entire crash. So now some people think it's funny because the truck driver, in my opinion, there's nothing funny about this video at all, but it does show exactly what happened. I'm going to rewind and play that again. Oh, shit! Oh, my fucking God! That is just a horrific crash. I mean, absolutely horrific. Trying to take off, the power that puts forward in that takeoff, and then for whatever reason can't lift off the ground, turns sideways, rolls across, and of course explodes. And I've been praying for these people and their families, the people who were affected and killed and injured. There was a lot of injuries as well. Just a horrific situation. I hope we find out what the cause is. Some of you may have already heard. I haven't heard yet, but I would like to know what the cause was of this plane crash. Again, I have a friend who's a pilot for cargo planes, and he's flown out of that airport. I don't think he does anymore, but he used to fly out of that airport there in Louisville. I know it's the Louisville. I know I'm not thinking of the name. Some sports guy international airport. I knew it this morning. That's where my brain is today. And 9, but that was Charlie. That's so sad. 9 confirmed. Absolutely horrific situation. Well, guys, that's it for me today. I haven't heard from my doctor yet. I better get out of here and wait for his call. I haven't seen my biopsy results yet, so I'm kind of waiting. They probably don't have them yet. But either way, he called, and I'm wondering why he called. But I do hope you guys have a really good day. It's going to be a beautiful day today. You better get out and enjoy it, because we are not going to have many of these days left. Probably this time, maybe 3 weeks from now, it's going to be pretty darn cold and dreary outside. So definitely get out, enjoy this time while we have it. I hope you guys all have a really fantastic day. We're going to continue. I'll update tomorrow on that UPS flight because I really want to get to the bottom and try to have an idea of what happened. We'll see how things play out in New York. It'll be an interesting experiment for us all to see. Well, I'm Tabitha Hassell with Tabs on Tap, and I will look forward to seeing you all tomorrow. Oh, by the way, before I leave, it's my brother's birthday. Happy birthday, Eric. He's not listening to the show because he hates politics.